ties all of these stuff like a file store and the Thelonious and everything together and turns it into a web page. And this is how you would do it in Ethereum as well. Ethereum, you do that when you develop a dApp with Ethereum, you do the same thing. You make a web page. You call, though normally, at least when we work with Ethereum, you had to call the Ethereum client directly. You had to set up some sort of RPC server and then work with them directly. But in our system, the big difference would be that you have this middle layer, the server, that helps you serve the page, that helps you do so that you don't have to put all this logic in the UI. Instead, you have this convenient sort of middle layer with JavaScript and all that. I think it's a bit harder. We would like to ask some questions. I'm sorry, we would like to answer some questions. Does anyone have any questions? This must be hard. It must be a lot of information.
It's okay.
Hey, can you hear? Question for me, Andreas?
Yes, I hear you well.
Okay, so one question I had is, I mean, it sounds like you're making a separate blockchain for each app, and I was just curious about the security of that. Did you hear the question?
Okay. Yeah, you can do that. The thing is, the deep server is it's very modular. You can use Ethereum as well if you want. Instead of Thelonious, you could make an Ethereum application on this as well. But when it comes to the security of the actual blockchain, that has a lot to do with how you set the blockchain up.
Okay, we don't need any more than that. That's kind of all I needed. Thank you. I mean,
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
I was just saying that was about all I needed. You could briefly talk about how tough it would be to use Ethereum. It seemed like you had a few new opcodes. I mean, like it might be a little bit tougher to use Ethereum.
So, okay, yeah, there's a few things. As far as like blockchain security, basically when you're a developer launching a chain to run your dApp on, presumably you're locking down mining to some extent. So that more or less takes care of the security in a kind of a standard, secure your server kind of thing. The nice thing about this sort of blockchain system is that you could open it up over time if you open it. So you could start it where only you as the developer can mine, and only you can change the rules about who can mine. Convert this test system with all this good data into a real live system where more people can mine. You can just sort of do that on the fly and let it go. And maybe we'll find that that's useful down the road. Maybe not. I think it'll be especially more useful as we move towards proof of stake systems. In a proof of work based system, yeah, it's kind of weird, and it's more of like a old school classical web dev security where you just secure the shit out of your server. But with a more proof of stake based system, I think it sort of makes more sense. And we're definitely moving towards a multi-chain ecosystem, the sort of Internet of Chains concept. And how all those chains will be secured from a proof of work perspective is a very difficult question. I think it's more or less impossible. So we're probably going to need proof of stake to be, so that people are putting up deposits for each of these chains that can get slashed on some bigger chain. So, down the road, maybe like 6 months or something, the process might go, you want to launch a new chain, you put up some security deposit on Ethereum, and then, if you mess around or somewhat or whatever you set the rules as, then your security deposit can get slashed, and then the security of the chain sort of boils down to the security of that deposit, and only you or only the people who put up the deposits are allowed to mine new blocks, that kind of thing. So we're starting to explore the spectrum of possibilities between the fully proof of work Bitcoin and the classical single server web development model. and sort of try and negotiate the little valleys in that spectrum where there are like niche locations for people to hang out. The other question, right, was about Ethereum and opcodes. We've mostly only had to introduce opcodes for the sake of the consensus rule stuff. So if you're trying to, if you want to, like I was saying, if you want to handle a block, it's nice to deserialize the block within the contract itself, and so we introduced an opcode to do that. We could actually make that contract like that you would call instead, and I wouldn't be surprised if Ethereum went and did that and created a native contract that does the RLP encoding and decoding. So I'm not sure if you're familiar that Ethereum has this concept of natively compiled contracts. These are contracts that are hard-coded into the software, into the actual client, that do operations that you might want done at the native level instead of in the Ethereum virtual machine. So as it stands, they have a few of these. They have one for SHA-256, one for RIP-MD-160, mostly so that we can follow Bitcoin pretty easily. And then they have one for the elliptic curve signature recovery. Again, that would be useful for verifying Bitcoin transactions and for all kinds of apps that involve signatures. So we can move the RLP, the serialization opcodes, into a natively compiled contract. We did introduce a couple other opcodes for convenience that we're trying to convince Ethereum to take on too, because they actually add more generality. And those are just for things like if you're calling a contract that calls a contract that calls a contract that calls a contract that calls a contract, there's no sort of standard way to get the intermediate addresses of those contracts. You would have to do something wacky where you like store the address in storage, and then the other contracts can go look it up in storage or something like this, or pass it in as a parameter. But that's not particularly nice, so we added basically a pair of opcodes that allow you to find out the length of that stack, of like the contract call stack, and to resolve addresses of contracts at any point in it. So other than that, though, basically everything is more to run fine on Thelonious and Ethereum.
Yes, and of course, about the security, that's what you talked about. I mean, one way to secure it then is to only allow certain people to make transactions on certain accounts, only allow certain accounts to do mining and so forth for the simple systems, and that's one of the we're focusing on a business, for example, want to run a fully centralized but more of a distributed system using blockchains to do what blockchains do essentially. So what you can do is you can have 5 or 6 nodes that does mine. You can have 5 or 6 nodes that act as file sharing nodes and so forth. You can control everything very nicely that way. So that's one of the purposes. That's also one of the purposes we use simple web page UI, because while you can run 1D server per computer, per user, or per node, you can also set it up so that maybe you have 4 or 5 servers that acts as people can just go to a web page, type in a URL in the web browser, and they would reach the D server. You wouldn't have to have 1 per computer or per node.
Other questions?
Anything else you guys want to know?
I see a big question on your face, Jeff.
Just thinking it is. Is anyone using? Do you know if anyone is? I think it's muted. Do you know if anyone is using the platform or playing around with it?
I can't seem to hear anything. I don't see anything in the chat. This must be a lot of information, though.
Yeah, I was just curious. Is anyone else using the? Is anyone else using the platform right now, or are you aware of other apps being developed on top of it, or it's a bit too early?
Yeah, we've got some fans in our IRC channel and Skype channel messing around. You can find us on IRC, on Freenode, pound Eris Industries, and pound Eris Industries-deb. And then we're working on a few dApps to sort of more expressively demonstrate the stack and what it can do. In particular, a YouTube-like app that should hopefully be ready next week, but yeah, who knows when software is ever actually ready. But maybe you guys will build something and let us know.
Is there any way to write an Eris contract that can send Bitcoin? Hello?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Can we write an Eris contract to send Bitcoin? Or does it always have to be Ether?
What happened?
You can work with Bitcoin because again the server is like a module platform. And we have a Bitcoin module. It uses the blockchain info web API to work with Bitcoin. So you can script. For example, you could make a Bitcoin transaction, and then you could take some information from that transaction and put on the Thelonious blockchain, or the other way around. So you can interact with different decentralized stuff so that way, but you can't do Bitcoin directly from Thelonious.
But I could write a wrapper around that. So the Polonius contract might say, you need to send Bitcoin from one address to the other, and then I would then externally do that. Could you use some scheme like that?
Well, what you could do is you would put in the backend JavaScript that in order to do a certain operation, but that's, I don't know, Ethan, could you give a better answer? Bitcoin Thelonious interop.
Ethan? Ethan, can you give a better
What's
answer?
happening?
It seems to be
Sorry, I
gone.
can't hear anything.
Ethan, can you hear?
You guys are not, I don't know.
No.
See you talking, but I can't hear you.
Check the text. Can you hear us? Check the text.
Oh,
Oh,
can you hear
there
me
we
now?
go.
Can you hear?
Yeah, sorry, I don't know what happened there.
Okay, so the question is,
Sorry, what was the question?
the question is, can we write an Ethereum or an Eris contract, or that can result in a Bitcoin transaction?
Yeah, well, yeah, okay, so the way it works is the D server allows you to talk to the Bitcoin blockchain using a simple blockchain.info wrapper. So you could write an app that runs on, say, Ethereum, and that has some JavaScript code that when something happens on Ethereum, the JavaScript code will go and create a Bitcoin transaction and push it out to the blockchain.info API. You know, that kind of thing is pretty easy. There's no real built-in support yet for the chains tracking each other. That's doable, and I think the Ethereum people are actually working on something like that, like some contracts that will actually track the Bitcoin blockchain, so that people can send transactions on the Ethereum network that inform this smart contract of what's happening in Bitcoin, and it can go and validate things and you know, try and keep up with the latest state of the blockchain. That's a lot more involved than just having your JavaScript send out a Bitcoin transaction, which you can do now. The thing is, you can't then use the result of that transaction for anything that might be critical, because you don't out of the box have a way to actually verify that it went through, right? So you can use the JavaScript and sort of trusted users to facilitate that, but that's sort of, you know, somewhat unexplored territory that we'll be starting to get into. I mean, I'm pretty sure, Andreas, correct me if I'm wrong, but this YouTube app we're making allows you to tip using Bitcoin. So that's actually a great use case, for example. So, you know, you find some app using some Ethereum, or you find some video with an Ethereum contract, you go fetch the hash in IPFS, you watch it in the browser, you love it. The contract also tells you the Bitcoin address of the person who produced that app, and then you have a tip button, and it'll go and send out a Bitcoin transaction to that Bitcoin address, all from sort of a single user interface that can talk to the different blockchains. So that's great, because then, you know, it's not like the YouTube app needs to track how many Bitcoin tips each user's got. If it did, it would have a little bit of a problem, because that's a lot harder, and obviously it can't trust you saying, yeah, I swear I tipped him. So there's sort of that element, but for something where you can just, you know, tip the guy and no one has to track it or anything, then it works great. Yeah, does that answer the question?
Yes.
You want to introduce yourself to them? So you can come a little bit more.
Sure. I'm Rich. Hi. I don't know if I'm even in the picture of this camera. Hey guys. So I got two quick questions. One is, you know, does your Bitcoin plugin or module support stuff like multi-sig and pay-to-script hash and, you know, some of the more complicated type of Bitcoin transactions? And the second thing is, what's your business model?
Good questions. So I'm not sure. I didn't implement the Bitcoin one myself, and I haven't used it much. In principle, there's no reason why it shouldn't be able to do that stuff. We've actually been thinking a bunch about how to write sort of like higher level languages for writing Bitcoin sort of contracts in. And actually, I think it was someone, maybe it was MIT or something, they recently came out with like an IDE for building Bitcoin transactions. So that thing looks awesome, and maybe that's something we could use. And if the sort of multi-sig and pay-to-script hash support isn't in there yet, then it ought to be soon. We just have to figure out a nice way of providing it. Because the thing is, we've tried to standardize the blockchain interface, but in building that standard, we mostly had the Ethereum design in mind. So, you know, there's like basically three main functions. You can either send a transaction, which just, you know, is sending funds. So in Thelonious, that's basically useless because we don't care about funds. In Ethereum, you know, you're just sending ETH. And in Bitcoin, again, that would just be a standard Bitcoin transaction. But then we also have two other functions, the message function and the script function. The script function being like a create new contract in Ethereum, and the message function being send data to that contract. So there are sort of analogies in Bitcoin. The script function could be the pay-to-script hash type, and then the message could be some kind of other weird type that's not really well defined yet. But so these are something that will require a little more work on our part to make sure these interfaces actually work well with sort of Bitcoin's design. And you know, we're open to input on all that if you guys have any suggestions on that matter. As for the revenue model, there isn't one yet. These are very, very early stages. Our venture capitalists were nice enough to take a gamble on the technology, and so we're trying to build out the technology. Sort of in the medium to longer term, it's likely that we will be providing lots of services and support in and around the blockchain ecosystem. So whether it's setting companies up to move some of their business logic onto Ethereum, or maybe it's actually hosting chains for them directly, or certain kinds of infrastructure to facilitate making, you know, things go more smooth in business. I think another big part, since we're run by lawyers, is going to be this idea of legally integrating smart contracts. We haven't seen this at work yet, but there's been a lot of buzz about the idea that your smart contracts could actually be legally enforceable, which is kind of a weird thing. The point of smart contract is that it doesn't need legal enforcement, it just executes by itself on a blockchain. But at the end of the day, they're there are many things in our world that we just can't code into a smart contract yet. As Preston likes to say, I can't encode the cuddliness of a marmot into a smart contract. So if I buy a marmot from you and it's not cuddly enough, you know, I need humans to actually evaluate that cuddliness factor. And so for those kinds of cases, because I know you're all going to be buying marmots off us, it would be useful if there's sort of a legally recognized fallback mechanism to the smart contract defaults, say, you know, to the justice system. So I'm not going to pretend that we have a particularly effective or uncorrupt justice system, but you know, maybe that's because it has so much bloat, and if we can take a huge chunk out and move it into smart contracts and actually only use the legal systems to sort of rectify issues in the execution of the smart contracts that can't be rectified by the contracts themselves, then that could be an interesting direction for us to go. And I think our lawyer overlords are looking towards that kind of possibility of like legally recognized smart contract platforms. So between that and between service and support in the blockchain ecosystem and building tools, I suspect we'll be able to secure some.
Yes, and also we do have something called legal markdown, which is a module that allows you to write contracts, legal contracts, and render like PDF files and something. And Casey, the other lawyer, is talking about something called dual integration. It's sort of in between using only legal contracts and using only Ethereum contracts. You sort of make them work together. So there is actual code and stuff in place for that already.
Right. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, these are very, very early days for this technology, and we're all sort of still figuring out the ecosystem, what it's going to look like, and where all the opportunities are. But you know, all of us, just by virtue of being here so early, I mean, you know, maybe it's too late to make millions off of the price of Bitcoin going up. But if this technology is really going to be as important for information security going forward as we think it will, then there's going to be all kinds of decentralized service provision that, you know, just by being early adopters, you'll be some of the first to, you know, have your computer running and making some currency for providing bandwidth or for providing some other resource, or, you know, whether it's a proof of stake or whatever it is. So, you know, we'll probably be early service providers in these decentralized networks, as well as also providing, you know, support and services for businesses or whatever it might be.
See? What? Questions? Okay, Ethan and Andreas, thank you very much for teaching us today.
Thank you, guys.
And we look forward to meeting you again, some of you, in person. And we will we have a homework assignment?
Where are they based? Where are they? Sweden?
Where are you based? Where are you all living? Yeah.
I'm in Guelph, Ontario, which is just outside Toronto. Andreas is in Sweden.
Ask him what time of the day.
We have another soldier in Guelph just by luck of the draw.
Andreas, what time of day is it?